Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. We are at the dawn of a brand new season, I guess you could say, for competitive 40k. We just had the April balance pass drop. Not quite a data slate, but we got a lot of point changes across the entire board and for a lot of World Leader units as well. I'm joined today by Brian. So it's myself and Brian, and we're going to go through some of the big changes and what it means for World Leaders. And specifically today, we're going to focus on some lists that we've written in the immediate fallout from the balance pass and how we think they're going to perform in the meta that is coming up to us. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dara. It's been a really busy past 24 hours. I've been crunching some lists together, getting some points together, and still doesn't all quite make sense, but I think I got kind of a game plan going forward, and I'm excited to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to actually just be building lists again. I must say it's the most excited I've been for list building since 10th dropped because I just feel like there's so much, every time I click into the other data sheets tab on the app, I'm just like, "Oh, that's cool." But yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say yeah, because for a lot of like the more mainstream competitive lists, losing that like 50 points was inconvenient enough to justify a whole list rewrite. So there's a lot of fun and creativity going into like what could be the new answer for this meta going into this
Yeah.
meta.
And I
So.
think it's really interesting because I don't think there's actually a concrete answer, like a single, we'll say, list, like an archetype that's going to work for everything. I think there's a lot of room for skill expression here now and creativity, as you said. Non-Gron has become extremely more, we'll say, viable in comparison to Ron lists, I think. Like what you can do with Non-Gron now is pretty wild. And we will get into that. I'm going to present a Non-Gron list. You're going to do a Ron list. And we'll talk about both of those and kind of the different viability of each of them and maybe if they have some bad matchups and good matchups. But I think to touch on the overall meta, what we're going to be playing into is very relevant before we dive into the world leaders. I think the meta going forward will be less hostile to world leaders, but still quite challenging. What are you thinking, Brian?
I think we're looking at a new mid-board mash kind of meta. I think we're going to see armies like Death Guard and Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns is still kind of a mid-board table army. They're not really a shooty army. They're kind of weird. We're going to see Thousand Suns on the rise. We're going to see Orcs, obviously, Death Guard, um, and Space Marines is still going to be pretty prevalent. Black Templars are still going to be running around. I think we're going to see a very interesting like middle of the board mash, and for world leaders, that's exactly where we want to be. Um, we want to be dominant. And now that Custodes are kind of like taking a step back from being the dominant mid-table bully, we kind of have the opportunity to fill that vacuum.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like we are very much going to be stepping into the golden shoes, so to speak, as maybe the benchmark for a melee army in this season. I think we can probably replace Custodes in that sort of environment, which will be really interesting. There are still going to be some big sharks at the top of the meta. I think it's fair to say that Necrons, even though they were hit, were probably not hit enough to take them out of the running. You reckon they're still going to be around the top?
Oh yeah, they're still going to be they're one of the more accessible armies to get into, just kind of like Custodes. They're very accessible to get into. They're very easy to pick up and play, specifically Canoptic Court. Um, they're very easy on the player for a tournament going for GT, so you're still going to see them as a common GT army. And I think that world leaders actually have a lot of play into them. I think we had play into them before, but now we definitely have a little bit more. You're going to see them starting to drop that second Satan down to one, or they're going to be dropping a Doomstalker in the back line. So they're going to have less opportunities to punish or kind of like zone you out from eight bound positioning or getting Mo out of your Rhino. Like they're going to be a little bit more limited on their answers to deal with just kind of us enveloping and getting the tools in place we need to be able to deal with their threats.
Yeah,
So
I think that
I
makes a
think
lot of sense.
Necrons are absolutely still going to be around. I don't think that we are definitely one of the matchups that benefits from their nerf the most.
Yep, I agree with that. And then I think it's fair to say that Iron Storm is probably still going to be quite popular. Like the points changes to the Iron Storm Black Templars archetype were,
40 points.
yeah, really meaningless, I
And,
would say.
and that That was the Black Templar one. No, the Black Templar one was like more like 60, 70 points. The Dark Angels one, which is like its weird Fortnite Battle Bus cousin, that one only went up like 40 points, and that one's probably going to take off a little bit more. Granted, I don't know how it probably doesn't do super well into 120 boys, but
Nowhere for the Storm Ravens to go, right?
yep, nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose okay, on that note, let's touch on the big green problem. Probably the I would say the biggest issue going forward for a lot of armies, ourselves included, is going to be the Orc Menace with the new codex. Yeah, we talked a lot about it over the last week or so in Discord, and even on stream yesterday. Orcs are going to be real problematic, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be negative, super negative about it, but I legitimately think there's a fear for that specific archetype probably being the most toxic list to come out of 10th edition so far.
Let's go. Let's go.
I've fought against other swarm lists before. And it's not necessarily that it's broken or overpowered, it's that it creates very unfun play patterns. Endless Swarm, for example, I've played against 240 Gaunts. I've played against 100 Gaunts. I've been boxed into my deployment zone, and I've been boxed into my deployment zone for 3 turns in a row. And the game plan revolves around usually the player doesn't even try to roll dice because they're just fighting the clock. And they'll speed play as much as they can. But the thing about Tyranids, though, is that they don't have 5-up rerolling invulns, and they're not T5, and they also are pretty bad in melee and shooting as far as a Gaunt is concerned. A boy is none of those. A boy is T5, has a 5-up invuln, has a 5-up feel no pain, and can still do considerable amount of damage in melee. So I'm really concerned for the jumping boys into our face turn 1 off of losing the die roll. And I think I did the math today while I was in the shower. I think a 20 boy squad plus a character can screen out 56 inches of space, making 2 triangles at the end. So even on Dawn of War, you have a very limited 1-inch gap at the ends of both sides of the table to escape your deployment zone from. I see that as being quite toxic.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I'm hoping it's not as bad as I think, but Angron sweeping kills like 9 boys. Khorne plus 10 plus sustained kills like 17 boys. We have like no good answer to pick up just 20 boys with a feel no pain without like doubling down on it. And that's going to be problematic for us. And we are one of the better armies, I feel like, for just raw dice output. Yeah. So I'm concerned. And that's only 900 points of their army too. There's also 1,100 points of orcs behind it.
Yeah. There's still another half an army after you kill the 120 boys. And if you kill the 120 boys, it's probably taken your army to do that. And you've probably lost a lot of assets along the way. I'm with you. Like, I don't want to be too negative, but I do think it's going to be one of the most toxic archetypes in 10th. It's also incredibly easy to play. Like, you need very little skill to be able to get a lot of wins with 120 boys. You just need to know how to dad jump 20 boys and position them correctly to stop your opponent moving. Naturally, if the world leader players go first, you have that opportunity to push out and expand your realm. But if you don't, it's a real bad time. You could be looking at, honestly, very not much going in. I think Scout is like one way that you can kind of push out that border. But then the question becomes like, how much stuff do you really want to scout out there as like I'm doing this to push out my expansion without actually just giving that stuff away, right? And I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm right there with you that it could be quite a rough archetype for us to get through. And I think, as you correctly said, us and Deckard are maybe 2 of those factions that are more favored into it than others, and it's still incredibly rough. I have no idea how something like MSU Eldar deals with this, or Hypercrypt Necrons. It's like, yeah, cool. Theoretically, you can teleport, but where? Like you can't put anything down.
And they have like that one Locust squad that's usually pretty good at like picking up, like dumping 36 shots on something, but that's it. Like they don't have the output to deal with 6 of them.
Yeah,
6 squads of these boys. And it's a problem that's going to need to get solved. I don't know how fast GW is going to act. It's probably going to get hit in the next data slate, maybe before then. And maybe it's not a problem at all, but it's a genuine concern I have at the moment in time. And I know of 2 orc players at the moment that have, in my local meta, in my RTT meta that have 120 painted boys ready to go,
I
just to
don't
have
think
them
it's
in a box.
uncommon. Yeah, I don't think that's uncommon at all. I know people are like, oh, hobby lag. It's like I equated it today to if we turned around tomorrow and 60 Berserkers was suddenly an extremely meta list, the amount of World Eater players that have that ready already is a lot, and I think it's the same for the orcs. So yeah, without harboring too much on it, they're going to be the big fish to kill, and I don't know how good we're going to be at doing it. But um, we have seen a lot of really good changes for the world eaters in this balance pass, and we're going to talk about those now. We're going to present some lists as well based off these changes and kind of how we're feeling about things that we could consider to be good in the upcoming meta. But that's like a brief overview of the big sharks. Obviously, the mid table is going to be a real mash, as we were saying. Like, you're going to have T-Sons, Tech Guards, Sisters, all of those armies like lurking in the mid table. You're going to see a lot of that, which is cool. Nice to have the variety. But we can't really spend too much time diving into all that because we will be here forever. And we did a lot of it in the stream yesterday. So if you haven't already watched that, go and check out the stream if you want a full kind of rundown through all the different factions. But world leaders, let's focus in. So we receive points drops to like key units like Jackals and Zerks, and then fringe units like Maulers and Hellbrutes, which in my opinion has really opened up the toolbox, or like deepened it for want of a better word, in terms of like viable archetypes first of all, but then units which are now suddenly gone from like a fringe pick to like what did you call it in our tier list, like probably throwing to like
Not
actually.
not quite throwing
Yeah.
was like the C tier, and then it's bad and you should feel bad.
Mm. And some of
And I
those
think
units have jumped up, I think.
yes, I would definitely put Hellbrute to probably bottom of not quite throwing yet, maybe somewhere in the middle of there, and then the Mauler Fiend was, I think, at the top of not quite throwing, and I would probably push it into like it's a viable pick now.
Yeah, I really think so. I think Muller Fiends are going to be priced to move at 140. Like, really, really strong unit to just like push into lists if you have that 140 point gap, which I think a lot of people are kind of finding when they're building their list. They're like, oh wow, I have like these weird points left over. I'll just put in a Muller Fiend or a Hellbrute. And that's a great tech piece as just like running around, basically guaranteed 6 mortal with tank shock and a whole bunch of other stuff. Like, how much do you think opening up those two units as being potentially viable has changed like the broader environment for world eaters?
I think it actually adds quite a bit to our game plan. Um, Tank shock is one of the best stratagems in the game, and now we have access to it. There's a lot of problematic units that could be running around the middle of the board. Um, I mean, I'm gonna just say, for example, like Lionel Johnson's now 300 points. If you have a model like Lionel Johnson or any of the other big like avatars, Satan sitting in front of you, you can walk up to him and say, take 6 mortal wounds, and now you're significantly less scary and much more manageable to deal with. Previously, we haven't had that option. We've had grenades, which is 3 maybe mortal wounds. Now we have a reliable 5 or 6 on a fairly durable body. And I know people like to say that the Mauler and Hellbrute are like not that durable, but your opponent more often than not is going to be shooting at Angron or your Exalted 8-pound.
Yeah,
So
you got to
usually
think
like
about it like not in a vacuum, right? Like, sure, like by itself, you look at that data sheet and you're like, I can kill that, but at the
I'm
expense of what, right?
I'm happy if my opponent's shooting their last cannons at my Hellbrute instead of my Angron or my Exalted 8-pound. So I'm all for that. If they want to shoot at my like squatty little friend, sure, go for it. I still think the Mauler Fiend is probably the pick over the Hellbrute at the moment, just because its speed. It can move 18 inches just with normal rules, just insane. Like, even regardless of terrain, like 18 inches will get you where you need to with +2 to charge. I think 140 points is a steal for that model.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of them. People who were already running a couple or a three are probably having a great time. And power to them because now is the time for the big puppy to shine. And you, as the what was it, self-proclaimed king of the Mauler Fiends?
At the start of the edition, I was the first. I feel like I was like one of like the first people to have success with them. Like I was on 2 Mauler Fiends at my first GT, and I went 4-1, did pretty good, and that was back when they were like 180 points. I've since given up that crown because I am too much of a coward to do 3-2-1.
Yeah, I think Michael took that one away, right?
Michael took, and you know what? He can have it.
Yeah,
He earned it. Okay.
yeah, fair.
Um, But yeah, I think it's viable. It did well for me in the past, and it's only gotten better.
Yeah, I agree. I think it opens up a lot of interesting nuance as like the that little bit of extra, when you're like building your list and you're like, what do I do with those last 200 points? I think like both of these units at the current price point are the epitome of distraction card effects, and I love that for them. But let's talk about the other big elephant in the room, the decrease to both jackals and berserkers. And I think this is the more interesting one. Personally, I think as a big enjoyer of both jackals and berserkers was huge. I was expecting Zerks to drop to 95, so seeing 90 was insane, and I wasn't expecting any changes from Jackals. So I was a very happy camper when I opened out the point document. Um, I think this is a really significant change for both of these units. I think Berserkers really enjoy their new price point. I think they like that life of 90 points for 5 or 180 for 10. And Jackals at 65 is wild to me. Like, I think we're going to see a lot of Jackal tar pits going forward. And for the Demon Prince builds, the Demon Prince on foot, point decreases to both of these units. If you're building those non-Gron lists, they are just so viable now. And we're going to talk about that in the list. But how are you feeling about these two decreases, Brian?
I liked them. I think I mentioned I think I mentioned on my like onboarding stream with the whole crew. I was like running 30 berserkers feels like a meme and it shouldn't. And this is definitely a step in the right direction for opening that playstyle up
I
where
don't think it feels like a meme anymore.
no, that's my point is like
Yeah.
it did, and now you basically get a free squad of jackals if you run 30 berserkers. You know, think about it like that, 60 points cheaper just across the board on all the berserkers. Um, I'm really happy with it. I want them pushing alternate playstyles to just 8-bounce spam. I think they've done that really well with the demon engines, and I think opening it up to just like an infantry wide or maybe like MSU spam or even tar pit, like there's a little bit more like give and take there other than just 8-pound.
Yeah, I think the choice to not increase 8 pound was really good, right? We talked about that last night. Like, what do you think about it?
That was really good. I really wanted what they did yesterday to happen in the previous data slate because that would have really kind of pushed that a little bit more and gotten the ball rolling earlier. I don't think these changes are going to make us these changes aren't going to push us up too much, but I think they're going to open up our play style and really give us a lot more let us have a little bit more fun with the meta
I think they go
while
a
still
long
staying at
way.
that level.
Yeah, I think they go a long way into closing the gap between non-Gron and Angron lists. Like, that's what it is for me. I think they're quite similar in power level now. What do you think about that?
I still probably think the Angron list is going to be just a little bit better, but maybe into Horde meta. Angron only killing 7 boys at a time may not be the answer.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe it is the extra 20 berserkers that's the answer. So um, I still am going to stick to Angron for now, but definitely it's not quite throwing anymore.
thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, I obviously as the I'm not. Will I say pioneer? Maybe pioneer of non-ground lists. I've been the one who's been running it
Definitely the
competitively for
biggest advocate, I feel
definitely
like.
biggest advocate. Yeah, front runner maybe. Yeah, like it's a really powerful change for those armies. I do think it closes the gap. I do think Angron is still better, and an Angron based list is still better. Maybe in the current meta, though, as you said, like non-Gron has a little bit more viability. I do agree there, but yeah, I think it makes that whole archetype less laughable if you tell someone that you're doing it and wanting to take yourself seriously. So I think that's great. And yeah, I think there is like scope for demon engine lists now as well. But I think overall, with these changes, world leaders find themselves pretty well positioned in the overall meta. But what do you think? Like, where are we falling in the wider scheme of things?
I think previously in the hands of a good pilot, world leaders were a solid 3-2-4-1 army. I think we're gonna see more people rise to that 4-1-3-2 bracket. And I think we're gonna see a little bit more podiums too. Uh, Specifically, we've had a lot of undefeated Demon Engines lists. I don't think many have won events, but they've all been undefeated, coming like second, third place. Those lists just got better. Like they picked up 80 points and just got more consistent because now they have more point scorers running around the board, like an extra squad of spawn that's going to score them 10 more points over the course of all of their games in that entire tournament and potentially push them into first place. So I think we're going to see world leaders start to just tick up just like one little notch. I think previously we were probably a C tier army. Now we're probably like a B tier army, if you want to think about it like that. And in the hands of a good pilot that can really express their skill, um, shouldn't have a problem podiuming. We won't
Yeah.
be super common, but it's definitely going to happen.
My question here is, you remember the stats breakdown video I did a couple of weeks ago where I reviewed the last 3 months of the meta, and I hypothesized that a 50 to 100 point change in world leader lists for the top level players would be extremely powerful, would see them podiuming or winning events more regularly, while that change wouldn't necessarily reflect very well on the lower end of players. Do you think that that will turn out to be true? Or do you think those lower players will be able to kind of like, did they get enough to bring themselves up from that 1-4-2-3 to getting into like the 3-2-2-3 category?
See, that's the fun part too, is because with this meta change, you had some of those like more cutting edge, like podiuming lists that were the more typical 8-bound lists. They didn't gain that many points. Like the people that were at the top probably aren't going to do that much better with it. But with the changes to all the demon engines and opening up completely different archetypes, I definitely see people being able to, because the 8-bound list is a lot more punishing to play. If you miss position just a little bit, you can lose a 200-point squad without blinking. Um, with them expanding the meta open to more berserker and jackal friendly and more demon engines, you're going to see those lists that aren't quite as punishing start to do just a little bit better. And I think we'll see players that were struggling to get to the winning rate of a 3-2, they're going to start to push that threshold just a little bit more.
I think that's actually a great point. They've definitely added a forgiveness element with this balance pass that wasn't there previously. Like the cheaper berserkers, the cheaper jackals, obviously the cheaper demon engines allow you to build in a certain amount of redundancy without having to lean into the 8-band spam, which I think is very, very positive for people who are maybe finding that the faction was very punishing to play. So maybe steer away from 8-band spam if you are struggling, and look towards berserkers as maybe like, you've got your 5-mans, you've got your cheap 10-mans that you can actually just put out and throw away and not feel terrible about losing that entire unit. And I think the availability of just getting like so much more jackals than we could before, if you build that way, of course, is like great for like the early parts of the game where you're like, I don't really want to put 3 8-bound into 5 marines, but like now you might have an extra 10 jackals that you can do that with. And I think that's great. Or just not having to send 8-bound off into like a distant corner to do like, signals or sit on an objective on that one with all the objectives down the middle. I forget the name of it. Like that's great for me. That was the big thing in my most recent non-Angron list. I hated having to send like 3 8-bound into like the horizon, and just be like, I'll see you guys in turn 4. Because like they just have to like live on an objective for a while. And now I've got an extra jackal squad that can do that for me. So wonderful. But I think I agree with you. I disagree that the top end players won't see a meaningful change. I think they will. Um, but we'll have to see how that plays out. We'll wait for you and Ryan to start winning some events again, and for me to maybe finally hit a true podium with Non-Angron. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Let's get into some lists though. Do you want to take it away first with a more, I suppose, conventional Angron list, and then we can pivot to a less conventional Non-Angron list afterwards?
For sure. Let me pull it up on my phone. So I'll brace by saying like this is kind of not quite a knee-jerk list because I did actually get to go play a game yesterday and I played a list that was similar to this, and this is kind of just like my next progression of thought. Um, this is definitely not something I have nailed down. Feel free to yell at me about it and feel free to offer constructive criticism because I'm all here for that. I'm here to innovate. So first up, we have the typical Angron, Invocatus, and Master of Executions with Berserker Glaive. I am also now bringing Khorne the Betrayer back into my list. I think that with the 40 points we got back, being able to drop an Exalted 8-bound squad that I was running a 3-man and bring in Khorne plus 5 boys, throw him in reserves. That's kind of like a new plan that I have going on right now. He's a good rapid ingress target if you need him to be. If your opponent doesn't have any indirect, you can even start him on the middle of the board. You open up play with Invocatus, throwing him up. So I'm all here for that now. I have 2x10 jackals. I really think, again, I've always advocated for this. 20 jackals is absolutely the play, at least 2 squads. I have a squad of 10 berserkers usually to go with Mo, but now I have a squad of 5 berserkers, and depending on the situation, I can swap them around. If I'm playing into something that's more elite, like say Custodes, maybe I'd want the 10 berserkers with Khorne to
Yeah,
get
or
more
knights,
rerolls.
right? Like, because I have that
Right, to
similar
just
thing.
drown them in
Yeah.
drown them in dice. Because Mo doesn't need that much help to just get value.
Yeah.
Versus Khorne could use a little bit of help to get that value. Now that Custodes, for example, don't have feel no pains to dev wounds right now, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
So just having that mod, I'm still probably going to put Mo with the 10 more often than not, but just having that choice as like a sideboard piece mid game is huge. I have 1 Rhino, typically for whoever gets the 10 man. I have 2 squads of regular 8-bound, which I still think are fantastic. Ryan kind of like turned me on to them. Just having the extra lacerators, having the extra scout movement, it lets you like do foe like if you want to like get in your opponent's face turn 1, you can still psych them out with an alpha strike with just scouting regular 8-bound forward, and they still have to step back and respect that. So I
Can I
really
stop you there
like,
for a second?
yeah, go for it.
Have you considered the heavy chain glaive as the weapon of choice in the upcoming meta?
In the upcoming meta, probably not still, because
Okay.
strength 10 is such a big break point.
Yeah,
Like
fair.
I've charged predators before, and I believe they're T10, and you say, okay, I'm +1 to wound, so now your small guys are wounding on 4s and your big guys wounding on 3s, and you actually really push the margin for popping those vehicles. In the coming Horde meta, I feel like we already have enough dice to kind of deal with typical Horde. I don't think a chain glaive is going to make a difference for the boys
Come on,
at
man.
all.
Just say it, please.
Also,
Tell me it's
wounding
gonna
on
matter.
you're wounding on 2s with 5 attacks, or you're wounding on 3s with 8 attacks. The
Yeah,
math is pretty close to the same.
probably.
Um,
Yeah. AP3 though. It ain't nothing.
AP3.
Yeah.
It ain't nothing, but they're on invulns.
Yeah.
And then I have a squad of 6 exalted 8-bound. I still think the 6-man brick is incredibly important. There are a lot of things that 6 exalted 8-bound sweeping with +1 to wound just take care of. We're still going to see 18 wraiths running around, and it's still going to be a very common list. Thunderwolf Cavalry, great
Mega
to sweep
knobs.
+1 to wound. Mega Knobs,
Yeah.
great, sweep +1 to wound. Um, there's a lot of
Lots of
things 6
things.
exalted 8-bound with +1 to wound can take care of. I'm still keeping them in my list. Pretty core to pretty much most world leader builds, typical ones. And then finally, I was stuck at 135 points of what to put in my list. That's not quite a Mauler Fiend, and that's not quite either 8-bound, and that's just in that awkward territory where you can't go spawn. I'm trying out a Halberd. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
doing.
go.
I'm starting with Double Fist, Double Flamer, and I know a lot of people advocate and say that the Halberd is too. It's too squishy and it's too slow. And yes, to both of those. But that's what a distraction Carnifex is. It's this slow moving, still annoying to kill, but not too hard to kill. But if they're putting what they need to kill the Hellbrute into the Hellbrute, they're not shooting at Angron, they're not shooting at Exalted 8-bound, which is where those guns are probably going to be going. Now, even then, the playstyle I'm envisioning for my Hellbrute is I'm probably going to walk him up the middle of the board, still out of in cover, and he's going to stand next to an objective in the middle of the board and kind of fill the role that our old Juggernaut Lord the Favored used to do, is where he'd be that mid-board tanky bully, where he's just going to go smack whoever swoops down to try to steal an objective, and he just offers some mid-table support. If you get the opportunity to advance and charge and yeet him up into a good situation, because you can chain his attacks, you can have an infinite number of activations on him as long as he's killing and piling into the next thing. There are funny Hellbrute moments that can come up. It opens tank shock for us. I don't think it's the perfect piece for our army, but I do think it does open up an avenue of play that we haven't really been experimenting with
Well, I was
in the
just gonna
typical
say,
8-bound
yeah,
list.
it's worth experimenting with, right? It's like there's actual merit to taking this unit, putting him in the army, and saying, "Let's take you out for a walk and see how you do, and maybe you're good, and maybe you stay in." But it's really cool that we're at a point now where a player of your level is seriously considering putting a Hellbrute in their list, just as like a we'll see how this works, and I'm here for it. You know, it just shows how interesting they've managed to make this balance pass that like suddenly these things are viable again. And I'm really happy about that.
And like I said, we're just at that awkward point where we got those like 50 points back, and you're like, you can take a one 3-man exalted 8-bound and split it into two things. Like you can get an extra point scorer and a demon engine.
Which
That's
is
a
really
conversation worth
nice.
having.
Yeah, that is
That's a
definitely.
conversation worth having because
Yeah.
I'd say exalted 8-bound are better than a Hellbrute any day of the week, but is the exalted 8-bound really worth like holding you back from having 2 units and
Yeah.
extra strats and extra gameplay avenue? That's a conversation we should be having right now.
Yeah, I just always think about the like victory point differential between like having those 2 units versus the X-bound dropping in. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. For me, it's like it's an easy choice of like I would probably take the Hellbrute and point scorer in there over the three.
And regardless of how well it performs, it's going to be close to the same level. Like I feel like the difference will be marginal. I feel like it'll be net better having 2 units because you just get more point flexibility, like you're saying, the extra VP you'll be picking up. But also, like, who doesn't want to run a Dreadnought? Like, that's just fun.
They're cool. Yeah, they're
I
really
I
cool.
I want a Chaos Redemptor so bad. I just kit bashed a Hellbrute together. I actually gave him Forge Fiend legs. And now he's standing like probably an extra inch or two taller, so he looks more like an actual Dreadnought, which I'm really excited to pull it out and
It
try to
looks
play
really
it in a
good.
couple
Yeah,
games.
yeah, he's really sweet. Yeah, I think it's really cool, man. I think it's a. I would say this is a great list of like if you're out there and not really sure about what you want to do with these point changes and you're still like dead set on wanting to run Angron. I think this is a great evolution of the Angron archetype. It gives you more flexibility that you didn't have before without sacrificing too much familiarity if you are used to playing Angron. Like there's still a lot of things in here that function the same way, but you just have that little bit of extra redundancy, that one extra unit, which I think is what a lot of people were missing from their lists, was like one more unit that they didn't have. And I think it's great for that. I think it plays well into the upcoming meta for the most part. Obviously, it may struggle with 120 boys, but what doesn't? And yeah, I don't know, man. I'm a big fan.
And kind of I just want to touch on one thing, like the whole boys thing. Just build your lists and keep that in the back of your head, but don't hyperfixate on it. Like there's nothing we can really do to clear out 120 boys so quickly or quick enough. So I would just play your normal game. You still might beat it, but don't go too crazy because you could leave yourself vulnerable to other play styles.
Okay. So, completely ignoring that advice, shall we do my list next?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so this is the evolution of Non-Angron. It hyperfixates a little bit on 120 boys, but not to the detriment of the overall list. I think this list has got some hidden spice. I would say it's going to be quite difficult to play, but let's talk about it. So we have the Demon Prince with the Helm as the Warlord for all the usual good stuff. We've got 2 Masters of Executions. We have one with the Glaive, and we have one with Battle Lust. I'm calling him Horny Mo. That's going to be his name from now on. We're just going to have to get used to it. Then we've got Khorne. He's in there as well, just because he's great. We have a 20-man squad of Jackals, and we've got 2 10-man squads of Jackals to flood the board with bodies. Then we have 3 10-man Berserker squads, 1 for each Mo and 1 for Khorne. We have 6 Exalted 8-bound, we have 3 regular 8-bounds, and we have 2 Rhinos. That's it.
I love it.
I think it's fun.
I just love it.
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the more it's very rewarding because it's also very thematic for what you'd envision an actual World Leader list to look like if it were in the battlefield too. Like you only have one legendary character running around. You could easily see this be Karn's Butcher Horde running around.
Yeah. It's near and
So
dear to my heart in terms of my own lore, like my homebrew lore. Like these are the boys. It really works. But
and
yeah, you've got 2 Rhinos, which is probably both the Mo squads in almost every single game. And then you've got Khorne and the boys coming in from Strat Reserve just to walk in and kind of say like, hey, what's up? Which is nice because you only have one 8-bound unit, which I really don't like about this list. You got to really be careful about positioning that unit so that you can get the rerolls for the Berserkers, which is very, very important. Khorne obviously doesn't need that because he gives it himself. So he can kind of come in from the flanks, which is nice. But you've got Glaive Mo. He does all the same good stuff. He's pretty decent into the boys giving fights first. But I think the Battle Lust Mo for the free heroic intervention is super nice. I think you put it really well where you were like, you put them next to the Exalted 8 bound somewhere in the middle and just say, like, you can charge these Exalted 8 bound. It is going to be challenging. But if you do, these guys are also going to heroic into you. And then they're fighting first, which means you definitely don't kill the Exalted 8 bound now because you've lost some of your squad. Like, and then they probably live and kill the rest of that squad. So I think they're, like, honestly, looking at the Orc Menace, they are a good tech piece to have in there for that. Then you've got the Prince, who does all the stuff that I like to do with the 20-man Jackals. Obviously, without Invo, you're not like rushing those guys in turn 1 that much anymore, which is nice because it means they can actually spend a little bit more time hanging out in the midboard and castling around the Prince to get the rotate Jackal shields for the 4-up invul. I really love that I have the extra Jackal squad now to just like send out into the sunset and say, go get me points in the corner, and I don't have to care because you're only 65 points. And I honestly think having the second Rhino is one of my favorite parts about this list, just as the thing that can be like, hello, teleport homers, hello, investigate signals, you are going to do so much work and give me so much VP.
They're so fast.
Dude, I am so happy that I got that second Rhino in there. I was like, will I, have a squad walking around and like have spawn? And I was just like, no. Why do that? Why do that?
You almost got a full Rhino from the points drops too, right?
This list, when I loaded it up, I had a Berserker spam list before the points drop. When I loaded it in, it had gained 120 points.
That's
which
insane.
was a vibe. Yeah. So I think this list is fun. I do think it is more competitive than the list I brought to Manchester, the Non-Angron 8-bound spammy list. However, it is harder to play, I think. I think it is actually less forgiving. If you mess up with the Exalted 8-bound brick, the game's over. Like, because that's your hammer unit, You do have 4 hammer units in the form of the 3 Berserkers and the Exalted 8-bound, but those Exalted 8-bound are your only, like, I need to kill the big thing. They're pretty much the only ones that can do that. So if you mess up with that squad in a game against, like, we'll say Knights or maybe even Custodes, it's GG. Like, it's done. So I'm worried about that. I'm also worried about the single squad of 8-bound. I really want 3, but I don't think I can work 3. I can't seem to work that out. But yeah, I think it's a hard list to play, but it's a list that I'm looking at it on paper. I know one of our Patreons has already run it and said it's like really fun. There's just a lot of stuff. It's real threat saturation. I'm just ramming things at you constantly and saying, can you deal with it? Can you deal with it? And yeah, I mean, the Prince is still walking around in there being really annoying. But what do you think about it?
I mean, back when I used to run 20 Berserkers, it's once you get to, like, I feel like you cross that threshold of at 20 or more Berserkers, you really start to see your opponent feel the pain from Blood Surge.
Yes.
Like, that becomes an absolute threat. Like, most armies will have like one answer for a 10-man brick. They can like space out a little bit and they'll stay 7 inches away from you and get 2 units to shoot at it. But that's like it. Now you have 2 more squads that are hanging around the edges that just can't be shot at all. They're just immune to chip damage. And piling on those extra Berserkers unlocks another level of gameplay and mental games. And you may not see it that much, like if you're playing against a good opponent, because they just won't shoot at you. But the ones that do shoot at you, they could just lose the game on the spot if they just keep shooting at your Berserkers and you pile in fights first.
The guy with
like,
Battle Lust in there as well for the free
oh
heroic
yeah,
is like fucked up with Blood Surge because like it's
you
like
just create so much dilemma for how you're just creating such a problem, and it's so easy for you to create the problem, and it is so hard for them to find the answer. And I love that.
I
really love that for us.
Yeah, where it's like maybe they're like lining up a charge, and then I like Blood Surge forward, and I'm like, "How's the charge looking now, brother?" So yeah, I'm a fan.
And I feel like heroic intervention kind of gets slept on as a stratagem too, because it is very expensive, and the situations that it's good are very limited. But I had the game yesterday that was pretty much what sealed the game. Is I put Angron out in the open and I was like, come charge him, but Mo was hiding behind the wall, and I was like, oh, you're within 6 inches because you had to base me. That sucks. And Mo just shot out of the wall and picked up 10 incubi.
Yep.
So fantastic strat. The fact that you get to do it for free and possibly do it twice in one can you do it twice?
You can. Yep.
You can do it twice in one turn.
It's a vibe. It could happen.
And you do get the benefit. Like, I know there's been a hot debate about this. Benefits of charging is defined as fights first. So you still get your +1 strength and +1 attacks, I believe.
I don't think you do. I need to
Okay.
look into it. I was
I
thinking about this today, and I was like, I should really look up those rules. Despite having the app on my
because
phone, I didn't. But
I think like the Juggernaut Lord procs his mortal wound still because he makes a charge roll and it's a successful charge.
so
So he procs his mortal wound still.
from my
I-
memory, I think it counts as having made a charge move, but you do not get the benefits of charging.
But benefits of charging, to my knowledge, I don't want to stay on this too long, but benefits of charging in my mind was defined in the core rulebook as gaining fights first, and that's it.
Okay.
So and
Well,
everything
maybe
other than that, I think is
that's
open,
huge.
which I'm definitely
Big
gonna
if
look into
true.
that.
Yeah, yeah, big if true.
But Lusty Mo goes and just nets 10 attacks. There you go.
Not to
I believe
hyperfixate
that's
on
how that
boys, but that
works.
would push them up to the strength 6, which is a vibe. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's a cool non-Gron list. I think if you are on the train of non-Gron as I am, it's a fun one to try it. I think the Prince is like something that maybe should be looked at in that list as like, is this guy really necessary here? Because he could be Invo and more stuff. Like I think he could actually be Invo and another squad of 8 bound with the amount of floating points on the list as well, which I will have to seriously consider, but my heart is like with the Demon Prince model I made. So,
You're also like doubling down on how risky it is to play that list wrong
oh
by
yeah,
giving
you
up
are.
your
Yeah.
invulns. Like you're just like
Yeah.
full send. All of my stuff is tissue paper.
Yeah, I mean, I have put the Jackal Tar Pit out in front of an entire Eldar gun line and it's absorbed it. So I'm kind of like, this is a drug I don't want to leave. You know, it's too good. So I think he's staying in for now. We'll see how it goes. And like him walking around on half damage is no joke, right? Like he is so annoying to get rid of.
And
But
I've also had like I had a situation at Adepticon where somebody mirror match had the Melta Mauler Fiend and they were just stuck in a 10-man Jackal Tar Pit next to a Demon Prince for 2 turns. Like
yep.
it feels good.
Oh, it's
Not for
really
them.
good. Yeah.
Not for them. But feels good to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's that. I think do we have time to touch on maybe one more conventional list before we close this one out? You have a vanilla alternative, right?
Yeah, and I kind of touched on this in the stream, and I think it's also a good alternative to Ryan B's more traditional list too. And I think he actually is leaning this way right now too. Uh you both lists had a singular Exalted 8-bound running around that easily just downgrades into a Mauler Fiend plus Spawn, which I really love for both of those list archetypes. The most success that I've seen out of my Demon Prince list that pre-slate, I put more credit on the single squad of Spawn that I was just able to throw in the middle of the board on the middle objective and say,
It's so useful.
over. It's so
Yeah.
useful because they have to overcommit to kill it. It's like a cheap version of a Jackal Tar Pit.
Yeah.
And situationally, they're faster, they heal, and they're damage 2. They could spike number of attacks. They're strength 7, which is a weird break point. That means they could threaten to at least do some damage to vehicles. Like if 8-bound are nearby, giving them full rerolls to wound, they're damage 2 with 2d6 plus 6 attacks. Like that could actually spike quite hard. Um,
You're
so I
losing me a
really
little bit on the but you are right. You are right. They can spike up for sure.
I've had them take 8 wounds off of like a tank before. Like they just can.
Yeah, I have
Um,
also like most recently rolled up 16 attacks into 10 jackals and killed one. So, different
well,
experiences.
you're not gonna kill stuff reliably, but
Yeah.
you can expect to spike a little bit occasionally,
Yeah.
is my point with them.
They're
And
fun. Like they're so variable. They're perfect like for what they are. You never know what you're going to get when you charge them into something. It's like, "Oh, this could
and
be amazing or trash." I don't know.
and at the end of the day, it's like the cheapest, like sturdy thing that we can throw on a middle objective, and I love
Yep.
that.
Yeah. I'm here for it. It's a really interesting variation. But yeah, I think these are both really fun lists. If you are at a little bit of a loss with Ron or non-Gron, maybe have a think about doing these. I do have a safer alternative for non-Gron. I won't touch on it now. It will take too long to go through. But um, if you're in our Patreon competitive chat, hit me up in there. I can run you through that list. Otherwise, maybe shoot me a DM or something and I'll catch up with you. But yeah, I mean, like we have been going crazy in the Patreon chat on Discord over the last couple of days. People keep sending me lists with triple Land Raiders. C Baker M, I'm looking at you. Sort it out. But yeah, if you want to hop in there, the Patreon link is down below. You can catch myself and Brian and Jamie and Jack on occasion as well, giving advice and fire hosing people down when they think they are going to bring 3 Helldrakes, and we say no. But yeah, that's a one way you can support the channel, and it's great. But I think for now, we can probably close this out with a little bit of a summary. And yeah, just like give me your quick thoughts, Brian. How good can we do in this meta? How much is our 46% win rate going to go up by?
I think we can only go up from here. I don't think anything got harder for us aside from one random skew list that's going to kind of be the boogeyman. I don't think it's going to be super common, but you're going to see it around a lot still, especially like GT results. You're going to see they're going to do well, but they're not going to be common.
Yeah.
I think we're in a good position to kind of take hold of that like mid-board bully melee army. Maybe not be as toxic as Custodians were with universal fights first and 4-up feel no pains, but we're definitely going to be probably the dominant melee army going forward.
I think that's fair. I'm going to very simply say to everyone out there going to a tournament, push us to 50% because you can fucking do it. It's like a call to arms from me and from everyone on the red path. Just bring us up to 50. We can definitely do it now. I'm hype. I'm so hype. I think this is our season. I'm going to push hard in this season. I think I've got 2 majors and I am going to go pretty hard on them. I'm definitely bringing a non-ground list to the first one. It might be this list. It might be something else. I'm not sure. And then we'll see about the next one. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time. Great time to be a World Leaders player. Great time to be someone who wants to innovate within the World Leaders army as well. We are no longer locked to having to run Angron and having to do a specific 1975 build. Go crazy. Don't let people tell you that you are wrong if you bring something new to the table, unless it's Helldrakes, in which case you are. But yeah, go wild. Have a good time with it. Have some fun. Build some new lists. Get out there. Play some games. And yeah, feel the nails bite. As always, if you want to support the channel, hitting us with a like and a subscribe is a great way of doing it. If you want to support us monetarily and help us go to more tournaments and get more tournament reports, check out our Patreon. If you're more into the hobby stuff, we've got options there as well. But yeah, loads of ways you can support us and hop into the Discord. We're all in there. We're all having a good time. It's free and it's a great place to be. But for now, I've been Dara. This has been Brian. We have been the Red Path. Until the next one, folks, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill main bird.